Mr. President-elect, thank you for taking the time to meet with me.
Governor Romney, so good of you to come.
This isn't going to work, is it?
I don't think so.
Great, okay. I don't think so. I'm going to go hit the pro shot.
And this is interesting. A new poll found that Donald Trump's favorability rating is up 8 points since being elected. Then Hillary said, yeah, I wouldn't trust the polls that much. Trust me.
The dating app Tinder announced a new feature this week which gives users 37 different gender identity options. It's called Why Democrats Lost the Election.
This was kind of nice. President Obama held a joint press conference with German Chancellor Angela Merkel yesterday, where they both talked about how close that they've gotten over the past 7 years and how they'll miss each other.
I've been loving you too long to stop now.
Call me maybe.
Headlines and punchlines from over the weekend as we welcome you back to America Talks Live. And as the name of the program indicates, we want to talk to you at 1-877-NEWSMAX. That's 1-877-639-7629. Waiting patiently on the phone in Pennsylvania, the wonderful city of Hershey, to be exact. Al is on the line. Hi, Al.
Hello, J.D. How are you?
Very well, sir.
Well, I just had a figment of my imagination that I would like to see the United States reinstitute the draft and draft all of these wackos that are walking the streets in the cities and all these college campuses, and they're I guess they're egging on the professors and so forth, and also George Soros, and appoint him as a general and draft them all to Afghanistan. I think they would end up quickly with a bad case of diarrhea and probably grow up very fast.
Well, you know, it is interesting as we're seeing footage of some of the anti-Trump protesters in New York City marching past Radio City Music Hall. It does appear that they all seem to be well fed. I cannot judge their personal hygiene. There is some concern they are part of that vast left-wing conspiracy that goes by the name Citizens United against personal hygiene. But I would agree with you in this sense, Al. I'm not in favor of bringing back the draft. I think our all-volunteer force is very effective. But I would say, what a difference between the young men and women who answer the call to protect our nation and these pampered malcontents on so many college campuses, where when I was going through college, the doctrine of in loco parentis, in the place of parents, had for the most part been eliminated, and you were treated as a young adult. Now, college students on many of these Ivy campuses are not treated as adults. They are treated as children, complete with safe space and coloring and comfort animals. Al, as always, we appreciate your perspective, and if you agree or disagree, why don't you give me a call now at 1-877-NEWSMAX. That's 1-877-639-7629. Of course, Donald Trump's victory will probably prompt a shakeup, just how our two major political parties operate. On the GOP side, many rivals who opposed Mr. Trump, who said some nasty things, suddenly appear to be reconsidering that notion in the wake of Mr. Trump's victory. The latest of the most outspoken of Mr. Trump's critics to meet with him, of course, former Massachusetts governor and the 2012 GOP nominee Mitt Romney. You see the scene as they got together in Bedminster, New Jersey. And following this photo op and then heading inside, Mitt Romney showed up in front of the reporters and offered this assessment.
We had a far-reaching conversation with regards to the various theaters in the world where there are interests of the United States of real significance. We discussed those areas and exchanged our views on those topics.
Theaters in the world not theaters on Broadway opposing and lecturing the vice president-elect at Hamilton. So Romney, using that phraseology, is in fact Romney a suitable choice for Secretary of State? Let's talk about all of this with someone who knows whereof he speaks, a professor of law at George Mason University, F.H. Buckley. He is the author of the book, The Way Back, Restoring the Promise of America. Professor Buckley, we always appreciate your time, and thank you for joining us today from Newsmax Washington. Now, there is a tendency to say that's politics, because Mitt had some nasty things to say about Trump and vice versa. What do we say now, seeing that handshake over the weekend? Do you believe that Romney will be Mr. Trump's pick at the State Department?
Well, I sure hope not. I mean, I think the idea here is to follow that classic piece of advice, I think, from Aristotle, which is keep your friends close and your enemies closer. But foreign policy, State Department, that would be a return to W's foreign policy. Trump's people are people like the Kagan brothers, like Dan Senor. These are people who are in love with the idea of nation building. And if Mitt talked about theaters of interest across the world, why there are a whole bunch of places we could invade, he would be, I think, about the last choice. Now, Trump's speech back in April about foreign policy talked about a younger generation of people that he wanted to reach out to. And frankly, these are people who really wouldn't want to serve in an administration where the conduction, where foreign policy is in the hands of a Mitt Romney.
Well, there have been others spoken about. In fact, the press right now is concentrating on a kind of Rudy versus Romney dynamic. The gentleman with whom I worked in the House of Representatives, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, waxed enthusiastically about Rudy getting the job of Secretary of State. Let's look and listen. I beg your pardon, I'll read it to you. Here's what he said on television, quote, "If Rudy wants it, he'll get it. He would do a lot both to represent America, which is what we need, and to reform the State Department, which we need. I'd be enthusiastic if he picks Rudy," close quote from Newt. Do you share that enthusiasm?
100%. I think Rudy would be absolutely perfect. I mean, the negatives having to do with lobbying jobs are really small stuff. He can channel exactly what Trump wants in terms of foreign policy. That's a match made in heaven. If you want something for Romney, there are other things you can give him, but not State Department. Yeah,
a lot of talk, since he's a turnaround guy, the VA, or something that needs to be reformed, that has chronic problems. I tell you what, let's go to the phones right now to Douglasville, Georgia. Lana is on the line. Lana, welcome to America Talks Live.
Thank you for bringing the proper perspective to people who look outside of the box. That's number one. Number two, the issue I want to bring up is the Civil Service Act, I guess, where once you employ with the federal government, it's next to impossible to fire you. It doesn't matter how bad you are as an employee. And I'm coming from this. My father worked for the federal government in the late 60s and 70s. And as he progressed up the chain, but he was honest, he had integrity.
And he saw a bunch of people who were not, I hear exactly what you're saying, Lana. I want to get FH take on it, but I got to just tell you, I agree wholeheartedly we should be concerned about Atlanta, because now with the employees unions, and FH, you correct me, you're the law professor, I believe it was an executive order signed in 1963 by Jack Kennedy, worried about a close re-elect in 64. Even Franklin Roosevelt said, don't allow the federal bureaucracy to unionize. And yet that has happened, and you see a dynamic at work that is altogether unhealthy. Your take on civil service reform, FH, what should we do?
Well, I tell you, there are going to be a lot of people who will be adamantly opposed to anything Trump does, and who will, moreover, feel real good about opposing him right down the line. And you know, you can't go around firing people. Civil service reform was meant to replace the spoils system, where you just gave a job to cronies, and that's not great. But I have my own solution. It's called the rubber room. There are some people who are just going to be totally opposed to anything Trump does, And for them, I'd propose a small windowless office without internet connectivity.
F.H. Buckley displaying a little bit of wit to go with his considerable wisdom. F.H., appreciate your time. Want to bring you back to talk more in depth about your book in the days ahead as you continue to train up the right kind of folks there at George Mason University. You don't have those comfort animals coming to class. None of that for your students, I know, F.H. I appreciate it. Hey, one thought in closing on civil service reform. You may have heard me talk about it. If we're going to have term limits for politicians, ought to have term limits for the judiciary, and ought to have a situation in the civil service where you take bureaucrats out of Washington and move them around the bureaucracy. Just a thought. We've got lots more to talk about, a prime preview, today in history, and more of your calls at 1-877-NEWSMAX right here on the Monday edition of America Talks Live.